My name is Leora, and I get to be the moderator of your session today. We're going to get started. We've got a lot to hold in this time together. Again, my name is Leora, she, hers. I am the moderator for today's session on trauma-informed COVID-19 leadership with Brianna Young and Antoine Moore. I'm really grateful to introduce my colleagues, Antoine and Bree, who both work for the East Bay Agency for Children for an incredible organization called Trauma Transformed, T2. And they are partners of the School Crisis Recovery and Renewal Project, SCRR, through which we get to partner with them. So I have the honor of both learning with you, all of us together, and also admiring my colleagues' offerings to us today. So with that, I'm going to hand it to Antoine and Bree.
Okie dokie. So my name is Antoine Moore. I'm a field coach. I particularly do a lot of leadership coaching and training.
I'm Bree, based right now on Ohlone land here in Hayward, California, just south of Oakland. And I came to this conversation by way of being an educator. For many years, taught middle school, and now I have the privilege of working with Trauma Transformed out of the East Bay Agency for Children and the School Crisis Recovery and Renewal Project. And just a little bit more about the project itself up on the next slide. So really the goal of the School Crisis Recovery and Renewal Project has to do with effective and sustainable change, really digging into the ways that leaders, both in the hierarchical sense and in the action-driven sense, can gain knowledge and grow in dispositions, as Leora mentioned, that idea of being, and how we recover and renew after a crisis, not just respond to it. And we also kind of came way to this conference as being part of a CARES, underneath the umbrella of CARES, or CAR, excuse me, the CARES conference for CAR. So just working under, as Leora mentioned, that partnership with T Squared, Center for Applied Research Solutions, and the National Center for School Crisis Bereavement. So as we keep moving forward today, there's going to be a lot of information, a lot of conversation that I hope to have. And so any way that makes sense for you to engage, as Leora mentioned, we love to see your faces, acknowledging that's not reality for everyone right now. Not everyone's camera ready or in a spot where that's doable. So please be sure to be as active a participant as you can, whether that's through the chat or through using those reactions. So we know that we're talking to some humans and that we're engaged in a conversation. So our goals for today, exceptionally ambitious, I will acknowledge. We're going to dig high level into 4 trauma-informed, healing-centered leadership competencies, looking at relational leadership, how we communicate in a trauma-sensitive way, what it means to be mindful and reflective as a leader, and how we can engage in some critical self and system inquiry to make effective, lasting change. We're going to identify specific practices related to schools and COVID-19. However, we're going to try to generalize this a little bit broader, acknowledging that while we've endured this massive COVID-19 crisis, there are also micro and macro crises that happen in our contexts each and every day. And so hopefully this feels really applicable even beyond and within COVID-19. And frankly, we probably will not actually get to our very last objective. However, the goal is looking at some of these essential renewal practices for leaders. And despite having a timeline, despite having what feels like a large agenda to cover, acknowledging that presence and being and breath is critical and is vital and is necessary. And even as I'm looking at this slide, I'm intentionally slowing down the rapid pace at which I'm speaking, seeking to mirror the gentleness of the waves for a moment. And so as we've been shuffling from session to session, as we've been probably checking emails and doing the work, even though we are still here in this conference, invitation for us right now to practice a little bit of stillness and to practice a moment of pause, to really engage and be present in this conversation we're about to embark on. And so feel free right now, and with cameras off, this hopefully feels easier. Go ahead and just find a position that feels comfortable for you. Begin to just pay attention to your breath without trying to change or adjust it. Just notice the cadence at which you're coming into this space. Notice the cadence of your heartbeat. Notice the natural, beautiful, organic rhythm that your heartbeat and your breath create together in sync. Allow your eyes to relax or close them if you haven't yet. And as that natural cadence of your breath and your heartbeat continue to tell the story of your day and of your current experience, begin to pay attention to what's anchoring you to the ground. If you're standing, notice the strength of your feet on the ground, that connection, that stability. If you're seated, notice the support of that chair or that couch or that cushion. Feel free to move from side to side a little bit, attending to that stability and letting that gentle rocking of your body fall in sync with your heartbeat, fall in sync with your breath. And let every movement and every moment, voluntary and involuntary, in your body in this moment begin to align, begin to move together. Consider how this small ritual, this small moment of paying attention, this small moment of being is the rhythm and the cadence of your presence in this space. And begin to slow your movement. Begin to become more aware again of the room that you're in, the space that you're in. Before you look back at the screen, open your eyes and look at something that is bringing you joy or a sense of calm in this space. Still attuning to your breathing, never losing attention on that, even through the rest of the session, but take time and notice a plant, a painting, a book, something that can ground you and call you in before you put your focus back on the screen. Now, this activity did not take a large amount of time, right? We're only doing this for a few moments, but this really is a tool, right? This really is a tool to take space to be more embodied, to be more in tune with what's happening for us internally. And when we know what's happening for us internally, we can more effectively respond to what's going on externally. And especially as leaders who are often invited to hold other people's stress, other people's chaos, other people's experiences. This is really an opportunity for us to take time to just get back in sync with ourselves and who we are before we begin to do what leaders often do and try to make change and solve problems and adjust systems. So thank you for the opportunity to allow me to lead you in that. Thank you to those of you who are responding with some emoji reactions or engaging in the chat. I appreciate that feedback always. And as I exhale, gonna pick up my volume again, get out of my zone mode. No, I'm just kidding. We're gonna stay level and focused. And so if you've attended a few other sessions from some of my SERR colleagues today, you may have seen these next two slides in action before. But really, as we're pulling out, right, and we're looking at the crisis of COVID-19, but also when we talk about just crises in general, right? We know that there are so many other things that have happened and are happening beyond just COVID. So what do we really mean when we're talking about a crisis? And specifically in the context of schools or systems, we see a crisis as being when a community member or an influence outside the system, and sometimes within the system, acts upon a group to cause harm or destabilize a community, right? So this is a disruption of that regulation, right? We just rocked, we just attuned our breath and our heartbeat, in communities many times when they feel like they're in a stable place, have their own cadence and rhythm. And when a crisis comes, it disrupts that experience. It causes harm and it destabilizes the network and the community that's built. And oftentimes it alters our ability to be present and connect with each other. And it oftentimes takes us by surprise, as you can probably imagine COVID did, as you can imagine many of the other crises have done that we have seen in our culture and society in the last couple of years. So that's what we mean when we use the word crisis. And as we look forward in the process and continuation of, okay, so this thing has happened, COVID has happened, is happening, there's a crisis that has happened. How do we move beyond just responding to the thing, right? Because that's something we do really well. Oftentimes we respond, we act, we do in the moment, but so much more needs to happen for communities beyond that. And so that's really what the SCRR project really gets into and digs into, is this idea of, okay, this crisis has happened. We see people feeling disempowered. They're disconnected from themselves. They're disconnected from each other. They're disconnected from things they care about. A rupture has happened. We've responded, right? We've cleaned up the debris, or we've found maybe strategies to cope in the moment. But then what, right? What comes next? And so we've defined this by 2 additional R's, because, alliterations and acronyms, we love those, don't we? And, public health and education. And so digging into this idea of recreating safety, creating a way to remember and mourn what was lost, and reconnect and engage in social action, is really this idea of recovery, not just responding, but recovering. And then moving ahead into this idea of, okay, now that we've recovered, what do we make new? What do we change? What do we integrate in the way that we lead, in the way that we respond to other people, that involves deep reflection and reimagining something even better than what we had before? Because in many ways that brings about healing. This idea of post-traumatic growth can actually have massive impact on the communities that we serve. And so that's a really, again, high level look at this, but that big thing happens, going beyond just responding to it. How do we actually recover, bridge to healing, and make something new and better? And so we're going to examine how leaders can actually help catalyze that forward progression and catalyze out of just that response into this idea of recovering and helping reestablish safety and help make sense and begin to make meaning and tell a story, and rethink and redesign systems through 4 major skills and competencies. And we'll do a quick dig into each of them. So we're talking about relational focused culture, trauma sensitive communication, mindful and reflective practice, and then radical self and critical inquiry. And you're going to notice throughout this conversation, we're going to toggle between the individual, like the me as a leader conversation, and we're also going to flip to the system as a whole and creating this larger scale, like what's happening around us in the system itself, almost as a person. And Antoine, feel free to come off mute and interrupt me as needed. I know you're dropping some good wisdom in the chat, so I want to make sure that doesn't get lost. Do you want to give voice to anything so far?
Well, I'll just repeat the thing that I said from the last slide that you were describing, around the 4 R's, and that as we move further along the continuum of these 4 R's, our emotional and attitudinal landscape changes. That's one of the ways in which it feels different. So there's kind of less focus on the, like, oh my God, we got it, the frenetic, chaotic energy, and more towards the, like, putting it back together, cohesion, energy. So that's an important, you can see why this is very important, not to just do the first two in response and get stuck there, but to move further into recovery and renewal. It's very important.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. That idea of moving from like this emotional embodiment, right, even deeper than just these practical strategies, and that shifts and what people experience changes throughout. Appreciate that, Antoine. Go ahead, Jerry, and you can slide to the next slide. So let's dig in then. And I'm creating an invitation for interaction. Feel free to drop this into the chat. If you're feeling bold and brave, you are invited to come off of mute. But just the first kind of competency we're digging into is this idea of relational leadership. And so what we mean by this is centering relationships, making people and our connections to them the core guiding focus of everything that we do. And I think in truth, many of us, at least me specifically, I would say I do this as a leader, but I don't always think that I do, right? I'm not always actually in tune with what's happening for the people on my team or engaging with them. And this involves both self-awareness of how people are responding to me, what's happening for me internally, and that others' awareness, being able to synthesize what's happening in the system and being able to adapt decisions based on what is coming up for me as I do self-reflection and am engaging with others. And so I would love to hear from a few of you. Where would you say you currently relate relationships, rank them in priority in your professional practice? And then doing some reflecting on what evidence supports that, what actions or mindsets are happening that you're like, yes, this is how I know this is my priority. Or perhaps what disrupts your ability to be focused on relationships. So 3 different questions, 3 different engagement points. Okay, thanks, Leslie, right? It's the most important factor. So how do we know we're prioritizing them? Thanks for that reflection, Taylor, right? I don't know that I'm as engaged in relationships, but I do have to be aware of needs of others and know what they need from me in training. Yes, healing happens in the relationship, from Chastity. Thank you.
I'd be curious to know about what people notice about their capacity for relationship as they're also experiencing deadlines, stress, a lot of activity, whether you find that you're still holding that strongly, or does that get dropped in service of these other things? How does that work?
Aaron mentioned the challenge of the COVID connections and not being physically present with people, right? And that digital barrier makes it so much harder to be connected and in relationship with people. Lucia, those relationships are the core of your professional practice. Team engagement. Okay, so some data there, right? Team engagement that you see from them informs how effective those relationships are. Thank you for that insight. Yeah. Yes, I miss just like bantering in the hallway, Aaron. I feel that. And just uplifting to something that Antoine dropped in the chat earlier. Yes, relationships are interpersonal, right? How I see Antoine, how I talk with him, how those casual things happen. But how are we reflecting as well, especially in light of, okay, we know we're disconnected on Zoom. That's disrupted our ability to be focused in relationship. We know we have so many to-do lists. We know we're holding crisis after instance after instance of challenge. How do we then, instead of just having this be a personal commitment, how might we leverage this and reflect on this being a systemic commitment to relationships and really creating pockets throughout our day, throughout our systems, where we are in a way forced to be near each other, with each other, present with each other in order to create those opportunities. And I think I'm trying to go back. Yeah, Leora added in the comments, right? That idea of, we know that harm happens in relationships, tension, frustration. How did you miss this email? Like, even before the session, Leora and I were emailing back and forth. Wait, what about this? And what about this? Like, we could have created harm in that instance with each other, right? But this idea of sitting together and creating that within our system as well is really powerful. And looking at this, and again, acknowledging we'll never have enough time to talk about everything we want to with each of these, but Moving to that next slide, seeing how there are dispositions and reflection points and capacities that can help us do this well as individuals and in the context of systems. And so doing this backwards a little bit here at the bottom, that try, right? How are you creating spaces in your system to begin engaging with individuals, doing circle check-ins? IDEO, based out of San Francisco, has some really cool tools for this. And also thinking about the agile process and doing like daily stand-up meetings where you just, as a teacher, I do this with my students, we check in together before anybody sat down for the day. We would just circle up, we do a quick check-in and say, hey, what's happening? What's happening? What's happening? Engage. Okay, cool. Let's dig into the work together. Just being present emotionally, physically with each other, spending time in those spaces. And we've talked about COVID being a challenge. Could you zoom in on a meeting and just offer support? Hey, I know you're leading this big presentation. Can I hop in and be supportive with you on Zoom, right? Thinking about those ways to just build that in, having each other praise each other, build systems for celebrating colleagues, right? And finding as many chances for collaboration or always the system itself can become a bit more relational. But then looking at those bullet points above, right? How are we allowing people to be themselves, asking questions that relate to, like, I don't know, who they are as people, not just, hey, how's your work role? What's happening for you? Appreciation truly goes so far, again, in the system, but as person to person as well, noticing little things that each individual does to help you feel more connected, to help them feel like they're part of it. You know, I noticed when everyone else was really mad about masks, you just smiled and did what you needed to do and we made it work. Like, thank you for doing that. That made things a lot easier for our clients. Like, just simple little things, being kind like that. And again, measuring connectedness, even things with climate surveys, and emotional things into performance reviews. Those types of things can all be strategies. Yes, and thank you, Antoine, for continuing digging into the chat. Okay, so next layer of this, in addition to caring about relationships, the biggest level and factor that helps relationships go well or go poorly is communication and how we talk to each other, both verbal and nonverbal. And so when we are engaging, when we're having conversations with people relating to COVID policy, related to change, related to new systems that are rolling out, related to the next training that someone needs to do to be HIPAA compliant, like whatever those things are that come up, how we talk about those things normally matters, but even more so when it's a crisis, when emotions are high, when our brain and our biology is not in sync and our survival brain is beginning to take over and our tensions, and we feel the weight and the stress of it in our bodies, right? How you frame and deliver that information will influence how people experience those events and those circumstances. And so being a leader, leading in crisis, be highly attentive to how that's happening. Because if not, that can risk making that stress and the perceived resources that much more overwhelming for individuals. And so a strategy developed by my fabulous colleague on the call, Antoine Moore, leaning into these 2M strategies to help us kind of hold on to how do we do trauma-informed, trauma-sensitive communication effectively. And so the first concept, this first M, has to do with motivating people. And it has to do with getting at what is happening for them. What is their desire? What is the motivation that's happening for them internally as they are experiencing this crisis? And so there's kind of a few different ways to think through this. And Antoine, please feel free to interrupt me at any point as well as we go through. So the first point, perhaps, that individuals may be experiencing, and again, just a plug, this is super related to the relationship piece before, right? And I think someone dropped that in the comments as well. Like, I can't know what people need if I'm not in relationship with them, right? I need to be connected to them to have an understanding of what's happening for them. And so if I don't have a relational culture, this is going to be harder, right? Because I'm not going to know necessarily what's happening for the individual that I'm communicating with. And so we think about different motivations for people, what's happening for them as they're responding and experiencing this crisis. The trick is, for some, it's this idea of self-interest. It's this idea of personal gain. Okay, well, what's in it for me? How is this helping me? How is this benefiting me? What you're telling me this information? Well, okay, how is this serving me? Right? And so what might it look like to communicate differently, to speak to those specific priorities? Another motivation that individuals may have is that collective sense, that community standing, being part of a group, right? Well, what about these individuals? How is this serving our group? How is this bettering what my experience is in this community? Are other people doing it? Is this what everybody else is doing? Well, then I want to be part of that. I want to be included in that. I want to be part of that community. And so sharing information in a way that appeals to that sense of motivation as well. This is our collective experience, our school system, right? After a big natural disaster in our community, right? As teachers, we are going out together and we are going to meet with families and see what their needs are. Oh, okay, I want to be a part of that because my colleagues are doing that. So that's another way to potentially motivate individuals. Looking also at sense making, right? This idea of confusion oftentimes comes in a crisis. And so how do we articulate that this decision that I'm making in the response to this crisis, this next step, this action we are taking as an organization, how do I ensure that this actually makes sense to individuals and is clear? Also, for individuals in crisis, we know that oftentimes removes sense of autonomy, it removes sense of control, it removes their ability to have agency over what's happening for them. And so sharing this, right, digging into this, like, I am someone who is intrinsically motivated by this need to have control over my circumstance and my situation. And so how can I then, as a leader, communicate that effectively to individuals who also, right, are motivated by that same thing? Like, no, I want to have control over my system. I want to find a way that I can contribute and I can take initiative. That's something that intrinsically motivates and pushes people forward towards decision making. And so how can I communicate in that way? Another element too has to do with like identity and saying, okay, how is this growing me? How is this helping me become more of who I am and who I'm meant to be? That's an internal motivation for some individuals. And so thinking about communicating that idea as well. And just acknowledging, like, not every email communication may necessarily tap into every single one of these things, right? Because not everyone you're communicating with is going to be motivated in the same way as when we see an action that we want the collective to take. Okay, we may have to think through different buckets of communication. We have to maybe think through, okay, who am I in relationship with? Who am I connected with? What appeals to them? What way can I communicate to them that will help make this change or this information be more digestible based on what's happening and motivating them internally, right? Because that's really what it comes down to. When we're already in crisis, we're already escalated, things are harder for us to comprehend and process. Like, that's just naturally what happens. And so as leaders, when we communicate, okay, what is that internal piece that's going to help them digest and grasp this information and this change or this action more clearly? That's really the secret, what we're trying to hone in on. And in addition to these internal motivations, we also have these core like fears and these core stressors that exist within us that will come up in communities. And we kind of see this showing up in a few different ways. First of all, we see this idea of the fear of annihilation, this idea of, oh my gosh, like it's all over. I'm panicking. This is such a big deal. Like, I'm not important enough to be noticed. No one's going to pay attention to me. Like, I have no control. I'm feeling hopeless and helpless and overwhelmed, right? This idea then is this fear of annihilation, right? And so as we look at this fear, as we consider people who are communicating with us, right, because we'll hear these things come up, we'll see this in the way they respond or react to decisions that we make. A remedy for this and a strategy to engage with this is, how do we build agency within the people that we are leading? What might that look like to invite people into the conversation? What might that look like to engage people around shared decision making? What might that look like to engage people in choice so that they feel like they have a bit of autonomy and support back in that situation? So that idea of fear of annihilation is one common fear. Another is the fear of disintegration, right? I already know this is going to be too much. I already know I'm going to be overwhelmed. I cannot handle one more thing. So now you're telling me that, I'm already in crisis and now I have to try and help these individuals, or I have to try and do this thing, or I have to try this new initiative or go to this new training to be equipped, and I can't do this. This is going to be too much. I have to just hunker down, or I'm not going to be able to move forward. Right? We see that happening sometimes, this fear of disintegration. And so the response and strategy to this would be building safety, right? Would be creating a sense of structure, would be creating a sense of predictability in the way in which we communicate, and would be able to hold people, right? Be able to create this sense of saying, I am holding these things. I have this in place. I have this in place. What supports can I give? Or here are supports that I'm giving to help you feel like you are able to tackle this, and be really communicative and really transparent about, hey, these are the things that are being put in place. Again, looping back even to agency. Is this enough? What else do you need? Create some shared decision making as well. And that last one is fear of abandonment. This idea of being left behind. I am a community, right, that does not care about me. I'm not going to be part of anything anymore. No one pays attention to me. And so the remedy for that fear of abandonment is really this idea of building belonging, creating community. And that can show up in the way in which we communicate with individuals, right, thank you, for being part of this conversation. Here are ways that you can connect to other people. Here are resources that are available to you, right? Encouraging people to feel like they are part of what's happening. And so Leora has dropped a question for us in the chat. And again, just that invitation, as you're taking a look at these common fears, what do you see coming up for you? What do you see coming up in your organizations when you see people responding or experiencing a crisis? What are you seeing in your organization? And maybe the question too is, how have you tried to metabolize them in conversations? I'll create some space. And yeah, Antoine's comment about big one for schools, specifically as it relates to COVID, right? How are we creating safety on sites? I think that's a great question.
I really love to hear this, because it really does speak to the aspect of this being in trauma-informed communication. When you ask people's opinions, or when people actually offer your opinions, you really want to honor. And if you get the same opinion over and over and you don't honor, then it registers as, you don't care, which is the abandonment one. And people walk with their feet in recognition of that. So I think that's a astute comment there.
So Taylor's pointing out the cyclical nature of some of this, right? This idea of one leads to another, one response sends someone else into a response, which then continues to kind of perpetuate this feeling of crisis in these spaces. Gail, seeing people withdrawing into their offices. Yeah, creating opportunities for engagement and recognition. Exactly. Yes, you are part of this. You belong here, and creating ways in the system to do that. Absolutely. Thank you for just that chat engagement and those reflections. I'm super, super appreciated. Lucia in the chat, right? Wonder the culminated experience of all three fears is a potential for job burnout. disintegration from burnout, absolutely. And noticing, right? Noticing these things are happening. We see this happening. And so as we're engaging in this communication, right, what words and what phrases and what language, but more than that, what actions, right, as we're communicating these things is impactful and can make that difference. And so noticing those remedies, right, building agency, building safety, building belonging, and finding ways to communicate those things clearly that are happening. Because as leaders, oftentimes we see what's happening, and we're not always good about matriculating that information to the people we serve and the people we care about. And so being like super transparent, super clear can be really powerful in helping metabolize these fears. This brings us to kind of another element, another layer of this. And again, these are all kind of building on each other when we think about what's happening for individuals in our systems in crisis and what we do. And a big tool for us to think about as leaders is how we approach these things with a sense of mindfulness and reflection. And so, as the slide says, right, reflective leadership is that long-term focus and actually digging into not just me as an individual, but thinking about our practices and our policies in the organization, right? And thinking too about much of the equity and justice work that's happening in our spaces, and how taking time to be reflective about the systems that we have in place, who they serve, why are they serving maybe certain people differently than others, and what changes and what adjustments maybe do we need to make as we are being reflective about what's working and not working. This is a little bit of hindsight being 2020 sometimes, and learning from one crisis to inform, unfortunately, the next one. But at the same time, even in the midst of this, being reflective both in real time as individuals and for our systems can really help us sustain practices that can be really powerful. And being mindful allows us to think forward, right? And begin to say, okay, next steps, looking ahead, what is the need? What is the response? Slowing myself down, forcing myself to take a breath before I just dive into decision-making and problem-solving mode, to be present and say, what actually is going to be effective? Has this been done before? How has that worked? And slowing the pace a little bit. And there's a few kind of reflection points here on the slide as well, thinking about different ways, different levers that we can move, different buttons we can push to really be thoughtful about where we can be reflective. And so thinking specifically about like time blocks and different structures we have in place. If you have a decision-making protocol that has been agreed upon and shared, don't just run away from it, right? Don't just say like, oh, this has worked for our team. This is like, we're unified on this. But I feel like I need to make a quick decision because of like X, Y, and Z. Like, no, don't suddenly just abandon what your team has built together. Hold on to time, protect the time that you have with your team. Be thoughtful and careful about how you prioritize the decisions, the initiatives, the tasks. Come together to pause, come together to breathe, and make sure that individuals are truly included in these decision-making processes in order to create cohesion on the team and get perspectives that are different than your own, right? I think so often we feel like we're an island and we have to do this all on ourselves, and being able to actually be thoughtful and mindful about who else is part of our team and the role that they can play in these conversations.
So the thing that I just said is that that there's a connection between actually I have noticed that under COVID, institutions and individuals have become very accelerated. And when you're really accelerated and you're used to being really accelerated for a sustained period of time, it affects your nervous system. And people are used to go, 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 go. And they want to stay and go, 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 go. That feels like normal. And in that place, it's very hard to feel like slowing down to reflect is worthwhile, because you always have this counter impulse to go, 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 go. And so the reflection is very important, but in order to get to the reflection, it's important that one practices this mindfulness. There's a connection between these two, so that you can calm your own system, you can calm yourself personally to make room for the ability to reflect as a system. So connecting those two, this personal practice and the institutional practice, is very important.
Yep. And that can be as simple as the breathing we did at the beginning, right? To just slow yourself down, and then doing that to open meetings, right? Bringing your team together, regulate together to be able to move forward to decision making and strategy. So again, this is just some of the bullet points, some of the nitty gritty of kind of what this means, right? So when we're talking about mindful and reflective leadership, really that idea of being present. I'm having a conversation with you. I am here with you. I am not with this. I am not with like the person down the hall. I'm not, right? Like I am not multitasking, checking my email on Zoom, because I never do that. Just kidding. Right. So that's an invitation, right? Space, being noticing, paying attention to what's happening around without reacting, right? That was my invitation at the beginning. Like, just notice your breath. Don't try and mess with it. I'm not asking you to slow it down, because what it's at is telling you something about what's happening for you right now. And so just tolerate it, notice it, and then seek to like listen and attend to it. Because when you are observant for what's happening in your system and for people around you, then you can more effectively respond to that, right? So then that when you're able to know what's really happening, what's happening internally for you and for others, being able to exercise choice over that. And instead of just moving throughout your day, like how you drive home, and you're like, wow, how did I get here? I don't remember the last 5 blocks. Like letting go of that and being able to be aware of how you're moving throughout your day and how you're responding. And then kind of the last 3 are more that reflective idea about digging into curiosity, about not holding your opinion and your approach to the world as being absolute or the only one. And a special shout out on that point to my fellow white folks in the room, and acknowledging the ways that our system conditions us to think that that's the way that it is. And the reality is we need to be inquirers, and we need to be curious, and we need to back up and sit down and zip it sometimes in order to actually find a productive and beautiful solution. And that maintains open mind, open heart, open will. Additionally, too, like I've said before, toggling between the individual and the system, right? As a leader, being able to step back and say, okay, even just beyond my department or my team, what's been happening for the whole system? And I don't want to be caught up in it. I want to be present. I want to notice the space. I want to respond. I want to be mindful of where I'm at and my role in the system, but not be caught up in it, right? And then that contemplative idea, that reflecting, pulling in the values of everyone to really be engaging in that work. And I appreciate the movement forward. Thank you with our timing. So, and the last piece of this really is this idea of self and critical inquiry. And it's this idea of, okay, we have a self-concept, we're growing in mindfulness, reflectiveness, which is cultivating awareness within us. Now this is taking it even more to that next level of saying, okay, what additional culture needs shifting in our organization and what practices? And this is a visual. I'd love to walk us through this, but we do not have time, of course. And so looking at, there's 5 different points here to reflect on patterns that we see in our organization and in ourselves. And I want to zoom in right now on kind of that step 3 and this multi-Venn diagram that's really digging out, okay, what is at the core of what I'm wanting to do out of this crisis, based on how COVID has impacted my team, based on how, I don't know, things the Supreme Court's doing, current events that are happening. Like, what is my desire out of this? How do I connect? Who am I? What's important? And how all of those things overlap right into becoming the desire that we want to see come out of this. And then our decisions and our systems and our practices and habits actually aligning with what we say we desire or not. And what's really critical, and you can go on to the next slide here, is this idea of I have to be willing to be self-critical, hold humility, but also let go of things that I thought were right, and let go of things that I thought worked, and let go of things that I thought were the way to do it when I'm encountering new information, new opinions, new perspectives. And so that's really that critical inquiry and that examination of our policy, our curriculum, our interventions, our performance measures, the system itself, because if it's not serving people, we're not encouraging and helping people in the face of this crisis, then what are we doing? What are you doing? Are we going to protect the system more than we protect the process that we need to bring people into in order to be healed and be whole and be helpful? And again, I'm looking at the time. And so really just quickly an invitation for you. And this is something you can take with you. I'm giving you homework. You know, I told you I was a teacher, so I bet you didn't know this was coming. Reflecting ahead about, so how do I adapt? How do I assimilate these things into my practice? And the invitation really comes down to both a self commitment, you as a human being. How am I impacting my leadership? How am I doing my systems? How am I approaching people? Which one of those four felt exceptionally resonant for you as an individual? And what can you commit to in the near term, the next couple of weeks or month? And what can you commit to in the far term? And then the same thing with your system, right? Which of these concepts felt really resonant? Which of these points felt resonant in your system? Both in the near term, then, what is a goal you can set? And in the far term, a goal you can set. And so off of that, that's your homework. Hold on to that. Do some reflecting after the session. So thank you so much. I appreciate each of you for being here.